River 24, or need to taxi with Victor? Taxi me, Echo River 24.
Here it is. That clock is ticking. Okay, you have the aircraft.
Welcome back, DCS Hacks fans. It's Cabi 599 back with you. Want to give you some apologies up front. My chair that I'm sitting in squeaks a lot, so if you hear some funny squeaking, it's the chair's fault, not mine. Anyway, in this chapter, we are going to cover close formation, the 30-degree fingertip line, why we call it fingertip, the route position, also the route echelon turn, which is part of the echelon turn segment below, making 3D corrections while you're in close formation, cross unders, the echelon turn, and also separating the formation as far as breakouts and take spacing. And the third way is actually lost wingman procedures, but that's maybe going to be in chapter 5 or possibly 6. Because that's basically when you go into the weather and the wingman loses sight of the leader, and that's not part of what we're doing at the moment. So we're not going to cover that in this chapter. Well, let's get to it. First of all, why is it called fingertip? Because if you take a look at my fingertips, okay, we'll take a look at Garth's fingertips. That's the way your formation should look, like that, where the leader and number 2 are the lead element, number 3 and number 4 are the second element of the foreship. This is sometimes referred to as the finger 4 formation or position. And if you notice, number 3 is actually in a perfect spot. Number 2 is slightly loose in the fingertip position. Number 4 is also slightly loose from number 3. Okay, what does that look like from in the wingman's cockpit? This is what we call a good stack. Stack meaning vertical positioning. And the way we do it in this case with the F5 is if you take the leader's head and place it basically midpoint of the missile rail for the wing that's closest to you, you're in a good position. You should also be able to see, just barely see, the exit of the afterburner cans. And if you notice, the leading edge of the canopy, the missile rail is actually in the vicinity of the UHF antennas on the bottom of the nose. Okay, so that's a good stack. If you're high, we call this stack level because the head of the leader is level with the horizon, which means that you are both at the same altitude. And we use this actually when we do wing landings where the wingman lands on the wing of the leader, and you want to use a stack level so you both land essentially at the same time because you're at the same altitude. So good stack, stack low, this is what you're trying to achieve. Notice you're looking at the wingtip edge on, so you don't really see the upper or the lower surface. What's that look like from above? Basically like this. Garf is what I call right now in a loose fingertip position. Really, he needs to be about there. Okay, a little bit closer, but not so close that you end up bringing your wingtip into the leader's vortex. That vortex is going to push down on your wing, and it's going to cause your aircraft to roll towards the leader, causing you to start getting even closer. You may notice that your stick is deflected to the right in this case, more and more the closer you get because of that vortex forcing that wingtip down. Okay? Now, what about the route position? Well, the route position is anywhere along that 30-degree line. By the way, the leader, to send your wingman to the route position, we call it kicking your wingman to the route position. The leader will yaw the aircraft with the rudder, and then the wingman will make spacing along that 30-degree line and no further forward than the line of breast point. Okay? I personally like to be in between the 30-degree line and the line of breast point with about double the spacing. And normally what happens is when you do a fence check or you do a frequency change, once you've checked in with the leader, you would normally go back to the fingertip position. Okay, unless the leader tells you to remain in the route position. Now, the visual way to rock your wingman back into the fingertip position is leader will actually rock his or her wings to tighten the formation or close the formation. And that would be the visual signal for tightening up that formation. Excuse the P-51s. This is my original slide that I made for Garf way back when. But when you need to make 3D corrections in either one of the two positions there, fingertip or the root position, first thing you have to do is you have to really relax. Okay, you got to make sure not to put a death grip on your stick and keep the aircraft trimmed up so that you're basically kind of making corrections with your fingertips instead of grabbing the stick like this. After that, the three things that you want to do in this order actually is to first work on the vertical stack, your vertical positioning, and then your forward and aft 30-degree line, and then after that your lateral spacing with the ailerons. Now, the further away you get from the leader, the bigger the change you have to make when the leader makes a turn. So keep that in mind. It's actually a little bit easier as far as correction-wise, to make changes when you're closer in. However, it is more comfortable when you're further away because you're not so close to the leader. Don't forget about that vortex. Okay, if you take a look at these three aircraft, the leader has a specific radius of turn when he goes into the turn. The aircraft on the right, on the inside of the turn, has a smaller turn radius. The aircraft on the outside of the turn, the green one, has a larger turn radius. If all three remained at the same airspeed, they are all going to end up staggered like this. Because the aircraft on the right, the blue one, has a smaller turn radius, that wingman's going to end up shooting ahead of the leader. And this is one of the biggest common errors that beginners make when they're in the fingertip line and the leader turns into them, is they have a tendency instinctually to pull harder and tighter, which makes the turn radius even smaller, and then they go shooting ahead of the leader. And once you shoot ahead a little of the leader, you should probably be breaking out so as to prevent any safety issues at that point. We'll cover that later on. And of course, the aircraft on the outside of the turn needs to actually speed up because not only is it a larger turn radius, but the aircraft actually has to fly upwards. So it's covering more ground, so you need to actually increase your airspeed there. So really it should look like this. Okay, the aircraft on the inside will have to decelerate, slow down, and also descend while the aircraft is turning away from the leader. Whereas the aircraft on the outside of the turn actually has to add power and climb because you're covering more distance, and you also have to climb, which covers more distance again. So you have to add more power, and then you have to turn towards the leader to try to get a little bit closer, if you will. Like that. Okay? All right. What about cross-unders? Cross-unders, this is right out of the Air Force's manual, is when the leader wants to reposition the wingman to the opposite wing. Okay? And the visual signal for that is the leader will give a wing dip like that. And then number 2 in this case will reduce his power so that it can retreat from the leader's position while descending. And then once you've stopped the aircraft by adding power, you also have to add a little bit more power because you have to cross from the left to the right, which is covering more distance. And once you have the aircraft stopped on the other side, you have to add even more power because you have to go forward and back up into position. Okay, we'll see 2 examples of that in the video coming up. What is the echelon turn? Well, the term echelon actually means to put all aircraft, all wingmen in this case, on the one side of the leader. Okay, we usually do this when we come up to the initial to the overhead pattern when you're coming back to land the aircraft, and then that way the leader can pitch out, and 5 seconds later number 2 pitches out, 5 seconds later number 3, and then 5 seconds later number 4. It's quite a thing to see, especially if you're number 4. It's really quite spectacular to watch them all do that. Okay, but the echelon turn, oh, by the way, this is right echelon, which means the leader can basically only turn left. It is possible to turn towards the wingman, but you really have to do this very gradually because otherwise the wingman can sometimes do like a bomb burst to get out of the way and break out of the pattern for safety's sake. So in general, once you have an echelon to one side, the leader can only turn in the opposite direction. So what is the echelon turn? Well, right out of the manual, what you have to do is you have to, from the fingertip position, match the roll rate of the leader, match the bank angle of the leader, and then you have to work the positioning just like in fingertip. You have to work the vertical first, the stack, such that the horizon line slices through the lower inlet of the leader. Okay. You also have to match the pull, as in 2 Gs. Our contract when we do echelon turns is 60 degrees of bank and 2 Gs. Now, you'll see an example later on where I do a route echelon turn at 45 degrees, but that's where the wingman is in a route position. Okay? All right, what does that look like for real? This is an actual real photo of 2 T-38s, and you can see the horizon going through the lower inlet there. This is the position and the look that you're looking for because you basically want to stay in the fingertip position so that when the leader rolls out, you're already in the fingertip position. Here's what a 4 ship looks like. Number 4 is taking the photo in this case, but it's actually quite spectacular if you're the number 4 ship and you can see the other 3 doing the echelon turn, and it's a beautiful thing from a number 4 position. Okay, real quickly, separating the formation. You may need to do this in case of for safety's sake, okay, with a breakout. The big thing with the breakout is if you need to break out because you shot ahead of the leader or you're getting too close and you're getting uncomfortable, you need to break out, or you're doing too much of a PIO, pilot-induced oscillation. The big thing to remember is clear, and that means look in the direction that you're going to break out before you do the actual breaking away from the leader so that you don't fly yourself into another wingman or anybody else, okay? And at that point, of course, you're going to call 2's breaking out. Listen for the leader to call 2 roll out. And then if you have the lead in sight, or I should say if you do not have the lead in sight, make sure you call blind, and then you're heading at altitude so that the leader can set up a rejoin. If you do have the lead in sight, go ahead and say that 2 has the lead in sight, request rejoin, and we'll cover rejoins in Chapter 3. The alternative to that is the leader doing the wing rock. Once again, that means tighten the formation, close the formation, and number 2 will always rejoin to the inside of the turn. If it's a straight ahead rejoin, you rejoin to the wing that you started out at. Okay? And what about take spacing? Take spacing, usually when we're training, we use this to gain separation from the leader so that you can set up what we call a straight ahead rejoin. You can also take spacing so that you can go into a turning rejoin, but the general idea is to make space between the leader and the wingman. You can also use this to separate the two aircraft if you're landing separately instead of landing on the wing, as in a wing landing. All right. The easiest way to do this is just to deploy your boards and the speed brakes, or you can do S turns and pull some G's to separate yourself from the leader and then pull yourself behind the leader again. The idea is to get roughly about a quarter mile separation so that you can practice straight ahead rejoins, which we'll cover in Chapter 3. The other thing you can do is leader can pitch out and do commonly a 180 degree heading change, and then the number 2 or the other wingman will take 5 second spacing and end up behind the leader, and then the leader can dictate whether it's a straight or a turning rejoin at that point. The less common way to do it is for the number 2 ship to do what's called an in-place 360 degree turn. This is not very common because it generates a huge amount of space, which requires much more fuel and much more time to complete the rejoin itself. Okay? So tell you what, let's go back to DCS and pick up where we left off. Oh, something I forgot to mention, we do have some new terms in this video. You'll hear me air traffic control call ident, which means identify yourself using your identification friend or foe transponder on the aircraft. You'll hear me respond with flash, which means I just hit my ident button on my IFF. Wilco means will comply. RTB, return to base. Dream 7 is actually an instrument departure procedure from Nellis. And Mint is a specific route fix from the Las Vegas TACAN. It looks like this. And there is Mint 38 DME from the Las Vegas TACAN at 17,000 feet. R4806 is a restricted military operating area, a MOA, and it looks like this. Nellis is in the lower right-hand corner, and when you fly the Dream 7 departure, you end up going into basically the east side, the 4806, and you'll hear in the video that we're cleared 4806 east and west. Try to stay away from 4808 because that's where all the aliens are. Okay, so now let's go back to DCS and pick up where we left off. Departure Dragon 55 flight passing 6,500 for 10,000 on the Dream 7.
Dragon 5 flight, Nellis, departure, ident.
Dragon flight flash.
Dragon 5-5 flight, radar contact, 3 miles southwest of Nellis. Intercept the Dream 7, climb and maintain 17,000, report Mint.
Dragon flight 17,000, Dream 7, Wilco at Mint. Now Garth's position is good as far as the line is concerned. He could be a little bit closer. This is kind of a loose formation. He is generally just warming up on this flight. You'll see him get a little bit closer later on, but his line is pretty good. Just needs to get comfortable and work his way in, make sure that the airplane is trimmed up. Once again, don't put a death grip on the stick because otherwise you'll make big corrections like that. Okay, stack is a little bit low. There's a good stack there. And he's going to start working his way back in, adding just a little bit of power because he's got to cover a little bit more distance. Also, you got to remember that you have to trust your leader is using one power setting and all trimmed up and flying as smooth and stable as possible for you. Okay, here comes our first cross under. It's a little bit underneath the leader. You want to avoid flying directly underneath your leader, because if he suddenly pitches down or you hit turbulence and pitch up, you could run into each other. So make sure you have a nose-tail separation. We'll give Garf another cross under later on so he can try that again. Okay, we're approaching mint. Departure Dragon flight is mint.
Dragon 55 flight is cleared R4806 east and west, block 10,000 to flight level 230. Frequency change approved. Report back this frequency for RTB.
Dragonflight R4806 east and west, block 10,000 to 230. This frequency for RTB. Dragonflight push channel 4 fence check. Okay, I just kicked out Garf into a route position. He's checking his fuel, and normally when we do a fence-in check, we give our fuel to each other. Dragon lead is 3.8.
2, 3.6.
2, stay en route.
2.
Okay, I just told Garf to stay en route so that we could practice a couple things for you guys. The first one is going to be a route position, lead turns into the wingman. And notice he's staying on the 30-degree line, and he's getting a little bit closer, which is okay, but that generally happens when the leader turns in. And remember, you're on the inside of the turn, and because your turn radius is so much tighter than the leader's, you're going to have to really decelerate the aircraft by reducing power. Okay, so Garf's getting himself back into his normal route position here as leader rolls out. And we're going into 4806 at this point. And then once we're established in that MOA, leader will make a turn away. Wingman in the route position will do a route echelon. So matching the leader's bank angle and roll rate, and working the vertical stack first to put the horizon line through the lower inlet, and then matching the pull so that you keep your spacing. And now he's on the outside of the turn, so he's having to add power in order to stay in that 30-degree line. Getting a little bit further away. Remember, he's on the outside of the turn, so it's common for guys to get spit out like that. So there he is, adding a little bit of power, and then he's going to start pulling back a little bit more to close the distance. So there's a good route position right about there. And you should anticipate the leader rolling out, so that you end up in the position you're supposed to be in. Remember, number 2 is supposed to be just be there. Okay, working our way in the MOA, setting ourselves up for an actual echelon turn. But first I'm going to close the formation, tighten the formation with a wing rock. Garf's going to fall back into the fingertip line. That's a good line. Just working the spacing, anticipating the throttle, or retarding the throttle to slow down. There you go. Got to come forward just a little bit and come just a little bit closer. But we're working our way to the first maneuver. It's going to be the echelon turn to the right. That's looking better. Dragonflight, echelon turn.
2.
Okay, trying to match the roll rate and the roll angle, bank angle. Work the vertical stack first so that the horizon line is cutting through the inlet. He's working it. Work it, Garf. Add a little bit of power to come forward. Okay, and pull just a little bit, there you go, to get back into that basically fingertip position. I'll do a complete 360 on this echelon turn so that he has chance to actually practice making the corrections. Now you have to put a lot of trust in the leader, because when you're underneath the leader like this, he can't see you, and you also have to remember that there's a common contract when we're doing this: 60 degrees of bank, 2 G's in the turn, and of course the leader will avoid unloading the aircraft, because then you'll run into each other. So he'll maintain a 2G turn so that you can practice doing the echelon turn. Okay, this is looking pretty good. He just needs to add a little power to come forward. There you go. That's much better. Just a little bit more forward and it would be perfect. Because remember, the idea is you want to try to end up in the fingertip position when you roll out. Anticipate that the leader is going to roll out at some point. Whoa. And this is a fairly common mistake. Typically what happens is, especially for beginners, is that as the lead starts to roll out, the wingmen tend to unload their aircraft first, which shoots them out like that. Okay, you want to try to unload the airplane at the same rate that the leader is, so that you basically stay in the fingertip position. There you go. Work the stack. Work the stack and then work the line. Okay, this time we're going to do a cross under, if I remember correctly. There we go. And that was a very crummy leader wing dip. That was a better cross under that Garf did. He had better nose-tail separation that time. Okay, working his way back into position. Right in flight, echelon turn.
2.
Let him work on a left echelon turn this time. That's a good match right there. Good position. Just need to pull just a little bit more. There you go. Pull a little bit harder just to get back into that position. Okay, the line looks pretty decent. The vertical he's working on, and the distance is a little bit loose, but he's working his way back in there. Try to avoid pulsing the stick, obviously. Okay, that's a good line. Just have to pull a little bit harder to get closer. And remember, the leader's going to roll out eventually, so you need to anticipate where that rollout will probably occur. Which is probably pretty soon here. There goes leader rolling out. Okay, does it get spit out? Not as bad as the first one. This one's looking much better. And then he corrects back into the fingertip position. Okay, we're going to give an example of a breakout from the left side. So Garf will be on the left side of the leader to demo the breakout.
2's breaking out.
Okay, cleared in the direction of the breakout before he starts pulling. There's 2 roll out.
2 has lead in sight. Request rejoin.
Rejoin, left turning.
2.
Okay, and now Garf is going to dive to the inside of the turn, but we will cover rejoins in Chapter 3. So the next one is going to be a take spacing. Dragonflight, take spacing.
2,
Clears in the direction he's going to go, and he pulls G's, and he's basically doing a big S turn. And then Garf will turn back in such that he will end up behind the leader to do a straight ahead rejoin is what they'll be practicing. And like I said, in Chapter 3, we'll cover the rejoins and we'll show you how these rejoins turned out. Okay, I don't know if you can see, but the leader's right above his heads-up display. And he's maneuvering himself behind the leader. Roughly about a quarter mile is good, quarter to a half mile.
2, request rejoin.
Rejoin, right side.
2,
And there you have it, guys. That pretty much ends the video for Chapter 2. Hey, you guys don't forget, give Garfi a like and a subscribe to help him out, okay? And in Chapter 3, like I said, we'll cover straight ahead and turning rejoins as well as wing work. That's being close formation while the leader maneuvers. All right, don't forget,